Hi everyone, welcome back to the Match+Book series on the EBPL podcast. My name is Paul. I'm the Adult Services Librarian here and your host for this series. As always, we'll be looking at different books, different genres. We'll be taking your questions, and we'll be trying to match you with whatever book, genre, subject seems right for you. Our first question today is, I like books that draw you into the story quickly and don't have too many characters. I find this makes it difficult for me to keep track of what's going on. It's a completely fair point. I feel the same way. If there's too many characters, I often find I'm spending so much energy just trying to remember who the characters are instead of focusing on the plot and how it develops. And when this takes precedence, I often feel like I'm missing out on what the book is supposed to be about. I completely get that point, and I'm sure many others do as well. The first book I wanted to mention on this subject was I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. Now, if that name sounds familiar, but you can't really place it, it's because she wrote the children's classic 101 Dalmatians. She wrote this as well. She's an English author, but she wrote this while in exile in California because she and her husband were conscientious objectors during World War II. She wanted to write a novel set in England in the time before the war. She wrote this one because she was longing for a time of more simplicity. It's not very specified in here, but it generally takes place in the 1930s between the two world wars. And she was looking for something a little cozier, something to kind of take her mind away from the war and for her readers to take their minds off of the war as well. This book feels a lot to me like a Jane Austen novel, so if you're a fan of Jane Austen, you might want to check this one out. It concerns a family that has moved from their house to a dilapidated old castle after the matriarch of the family has passed away. The father of the family supports them by writing novels, but he's had writer's block for years. He's hoping that relocating to the castle, to this isolation, will be able to inspire his writing by giving him a sense of peace and calm. Obviously, we're dealing with a somewhat eccentric family living in somewhat poverty, I would say, because he just hasn't published in so long. Our main purview for the story is Cassandra, the 17-year-old daughter of the family. It is told in first person through her viewpoint. Like a lot of teenagers at the time, she keeps a journal, and the book is told in a series of these journal entries where she's telling us about her day and her interactions with the townsfolk, with her older sister, with her father, and with her 29-year-old stepmother, who can be a source of frustration for Cassandra. Now we follow Cassandra throughout a year of her life through the viewpoint of the journal entries, and we get a sense of who she is, what her inner thoughts are versus how she interacts in person with people, and how she grows up over the course of this year, how she grows as a person, but also how she develops. There's a tryst she has with a local suitor, and that takes up a lot of the book. It's extremely charming, I would say. It's nostalgic in some ways. So if you're looking for a more feel-good, romantic, pleasant book with few characters, you can't go wrong with this one. Another book I would say similarly enticing in its own way is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This book opens in a much different fashion than I Capture the Castle. It's almost the complete antithesis of the novel, but it still retains the general principle of the question that it has few characters that are easy to keep track of. It opens with our narrator Richard, who murders a fellow student at a college in Vermont named Bunny, and the book is told in a series of reminiscences through Richard's perspective of why he did this, how it became, how he got to know this person. And so we learn in these reflections about Richard's life leading up to this event. Richard from California, but he moves to Vermont to go to the fictional Hampden College, where he only wants to study ancient Greek. But upon learning that there's only 5 slots in the course, he doesn't make the cut, but he keeps tweaking his personality and reinventing himself on the fly so that he could gain entry into this coursework. We see right away how Richard is a social chameleon in a way, where he will change his personality, how he looks, how he sounds, in order to fit in order to get what he wants. And throughout the book, we learn more about this group of students. Since there's only 6 of them, they spend most of their time together with their professor. It really centers on the group. And you come to realize, like, hey, if they're such good friends, why in the opening scene did he murder one of the other fellow students? And keeps you guessing throughout the whole book, not as to what happened, but why it happened, how it came about. If you're into books where the characters are often almost across the board unlikable, where they spend so much of their time in really debaucherous settings and in like circumstances, Donna Tartt is also the author of The Goldfinch. That's also a mystery in its own right. You'd probably like this one as well. Both books do a great job of showing you characters that seem to be forthright and seem to get a grasp on their character, but throughout the book you get more understanding of the layers of personality and complexity to their character. I have another question here from somebody looking for book club recommendations. They didn't specify if they have a particular genre in mind. They just want pretty generalized book club recommendations. I run the book club here at the library. I've been doing this for 5 years now, and I think I've gotten better over time. I've learned some stuff about what to do, what not to do. Don't choose a book over 400 pages because a lot of people just won't read it. And if you do choose one that is approaching that, for the next meeting, choose one closer to 200 pages to give people a break. Other general thoughts: mix it up with different genres. For every 5 books we do, I like to choose one nonfiction. I find that helps break up our genres a little bit more. You could also theme it according to the time of year. In October, I might choose a mystery or horror, something tinged with horror. I remember one year the group felt on Valentine's Day. I chose The Age of Innocence, where we don't normally do classics, but I wanted to throw that in there because I've read Edith Wharton before and her work still feels modern in the way it's written, even though it's set in what I think the turn of the 20th century. Maybe in October you might want to choose a mystery like The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. I found that one to have a lot of depth to it, of style for a mystery novel. If you're looking for a mystery, I would go with that one. It has great twists and turns and has a lot to talk about in relation to the characters. Is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. And same thing, great twists and turns, great depth of characters for a mystery novel. There's still a lot to talk about, I found, even though like a mystery novel would be like, hey, did you solve it beforehand? Do you normally solve it beforehand? Do you like to guess? I like to open it up to all these broader questions about the genre. Sometimes it helps to think about other things associated with mystery novels and not just the book itself. I find it always helps to diverge a little bit from the specific book we're reading about to other things associated with it. For that very reason, one of the books I definitely recommend as well is A Piece of the World by Christina Baker Kline. She wrote this great historical fiction novel set in Cushing, Maine, about the painter Andrew Wyeth and his muse for the famous painting Christina's World, one of the girls sitting in the field staring up at the barn, and this story of how the two came to work together, the trials and tribulations of Christina's life as somebody whose body was betraying her and who couldn't walk and who had all these difficulties in getting around and trying to live like a normal person. I found historical fiction could work really well. We've done Before We Were Yours, that one also based on some historical events as well. These historical fiction books are great because it gives you an opportunity to talk about the characters, and it also allows you to break from that, talk about, are you a fan of Andrew Wyeth's paintings, or what types of art in general are you a fan of? Are you familiar with the painting? Have you seen it? It's in MoMA. Have you been to MoMA? Like all of these things. Any book that gives you the opportunity to do these things is a good book club book. It doesn't even have to be something you particularly love. Say you want to choose a book you've read before. It might not even be in your best interest to choose a book that you really loved, because if everybody really loves it in the group, it might make for a little bit of a boring discussion. You want some back and forth. You want some dissension among people, because it really works best when some people like the book and some people may have really good reasons why they do or why they didn't enjoy it. If you want to go in the nonfiction route, I found that the books of Malcolm Gladwell are particularly great for book clubs. They're usually not too long, maybe around 300 pages or so. The topics are very palatable and easily understood and easy to form opinions about. They're kind of a pop sociology book with lots of pop culture within that. One of his most famous ones, The Tipping Point, where he researches points in history where an idea, trend, social behavior, anything like that crosses the line from a fad into an all-out mega trend. And he explores the roots of how they took hold in society and the path toward how they became phenomenon. And in doing so, he looks at things that we all know about, things like fashion trends, children's television, the American Revolution, the rise of the internet, all these sorts of things where we already have a reference point for them. So it's easy for everyone to have different thoughts and opinions on the conclusions he's drawing through the book and the research he's presenting. I would definitely go with those two routes if you're going to start a book club or if you need any recommendations for your book club. That's all of the suggestions I have for you today. The EBPL podcast can be listened to at anchor.fm/EBP library or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you to Melissa Hosick for editing this episode, and thank you for listening.